Of all the games I played last year, which was quite a hefty amount, there's only about one I legitimately did not enjoy at all, and that would be the horror game Outlast. I initially didn't want to make a video expressing my distaste for this game because I was pretty sure it would turn out like my Doom 3 review, which, let's just say isn't my most loved video. But after playing and thoroughly enjoying the surprisingly similar Resident Evil VII Biohazard, I thought, who cares if it's my least popular video, I still want to talk about it. So I'm warning you now, if I really did think that Outlast sucked, there's very few redeemable qualities. So if it's like your favorite game, this video is just gonna piss you off, so you may as well leave. Even though I'm sure everyone here probably likes the game and is waiting to see why I hate it before disputing me in the comments. So I guess I won't keep you waiting. Let's get right into why Outlast kinda sucks. Beginning with one of my biggest problems with the game. It's not very scary. I mean, this is pretty much a must-have for any type of horror media. You want it to be scary. Now, Outlast is very similar to a lot of the garbage overdone horror movies nowadays, where frights rely completely on jump scares and obnoxious monsters. Jump scares just really suck. They make you jump, yes. I'll admit I jumped a few times at the many jump scares in Outlast. And that's about it. They don't leave a lasting impact or make you actually spooked for a longer period of time. Like you go from calm to scared, and then back to calm instantly. Now, admittedly, a couple jump scares, when done well with the right atmosphere and at the right time, aren't that bad. But when majority of the frightening moments in your game rely on them, that's where it's a problem. And that's what happens in Outlast's case. They're everywhere, to the point where they stopped freaking me out because, well, I was just kind of expecting them. Sure, they are pretty good for streamers, which seemed to be a common theme. Actually, the person who recommended I played this game had never even played it themselves. They only watched their favorite streamers play it, which I won't lie would probably be a much better time. Even if you have some friends over, it would be mildly better. But just being by yourself and trying to experience it as a true horror game is not the way to go. The second thing that Outlast relies on is its unpleasant creature/character design, whatever you want to call it. Throughout the game, you come across many different things in this asylum. I think it's an asylum. I honestly don't remember if it was a hospital or a lab. I don't know. Anyways, I suppose these weren't always bad. They just annoyed me. They just take a normal person, add some wacky physical qualities, and give them an eccentric personality, and that's supposed to be creepy. And what you end up with is two naked guys that are supposed to be intimidating as they describe how they'll kill you. I barely remember half the stuff I encountered in this game because it was all just so forgettable. Save for the guys I just mentioned, they're like too hilariously bad. Despite the annoying designs, the way these characters are incorporated into the gameplay, honestly just the gameplay as a whole, is where I think Outlast is at its worst. Before that, I need to set this straight. I'll be making a lot of comparisons to Resident Evil VII, a game that I feel is very similar to Outlast. The one thing different is that, well, it's good. Therefore, I enjoyed it a lot more. While doing some research into this video, I saw a lot of people who praised Outlast referring to the difference between psychological horror and action horror. Psychological horror would be games such as Amnesia, that focus on building spooky atmosphere, maybe solving some puzzles, something along the lines of that. Action horror would be more like the later Resident Evil games. There's some spooky stuff, but also a big concentration on fun, action-y gameplay to keep you hooked. Apparently, Outlast falls under psychological and Resident Evil VII under action, but I beg to differ. Resident Evil VII bears many more similarities to psychological horror games, and those who say otherwise probably haven't played it and base their knowledge on the fact that there's guns in that game. I won't deny, yeah, there is guns, but honestly there's not that very many enemies, and when they come around it's not high intensity shootouts, but more methodical encounters where you're planning out your shots to use the least amount of ammo. So in short, Resident Evil 7 and Outlast are very similar. They're both first-person horror games, just with a lot of different mechanics that make one better than the other. Back to the topic at hand. Outlast's gameplay is rather odd, because if you try to explain it, it really comes down to just walking around. You don't solve puzzles or take out enemies, you walk from location to location. And that's about it. This is most likely why I found Outlast so tedious to get through, despite its rather short runtime. The plot in general is super all over the place. The ending was just insanely drawn out and uninteresting. Not to mention everything just seemed to go wrong. I mean, you finally make progress, then oh, that door is closed, oh, you dropped your camera, then you'd have to take an annoying detour. There was really nothing compelling to keep me going. I'm surprised I even finished the game. Compare that to Resident Evil 7, over double the length of Outlast, yet I couldn't stop playing it. You can say that's because I'm a Resident Evil fan, but no, 7 isn't even very similar to some of my favorite games in the series, and it sure doesn't tie into them very much. No, Resident Evil 7 is more compelling because it provides all this variety between interesting puzzles, terrifying boss fights, and just a heightened focus on exploration. With no interesting scares or gameplay, I just felt Outlast was extremely boring. But I'm not done with gameplay yet. Earlier, I mentioned the obnoxious characters and how they're incorporated, so let's dive into that. Whenever the game feels like it, you'll sometimes be thrown into situations where you have to walk from point A to point B, except now there's a scary guy there looking for you. Your objective is to sneak past them, usually while getting an item or turning on a switch along the way. And oh man, these parts were just not good in any way. They weren't scary or stressful, just more tedious work to get through. First of all, enemies are insanely predictable. They follow the same paths and they're almost always visible or hearable. That's not a word. Anyways, it's annoying because these parts could be great. You as the player can hide in all sorts of places, under tables and in lockers, and I felt like it would be awesome if enemies could do the same. Imagine you lose track of the dude after you, only to open a locker you're about to seek refuge in to find them there. Now that would be spooky. But no, these sections are very uninteresting, and it's annoying they're sections in the first place. See, in Resident Evil 7, for example, its enemy AI follows similar characteristics, but it's done much better. These enemies are so unpredictable. Literally every moment spent inside the Baker house is a stressful one because you know Jack Baker could appear at any moment, maybe breaking through a wall or sneaking around a corner. This stuff was scary because it wasn't confined to a small point, and you didn't have a set path. Half the time when the roaming enemies would catch me in Resident Evil, it was just when I was exploring, looking for resources, not going from point A to point B as in Outlast. Another part that plays into this is the whole fight or flight dilemma and the feeling of powerlessness. In Outlast, your only option is to flee. Obviously, this does make you feel like a normal human being, and like these foes in your way are the real deal. But the gameplay takes a hit because of this, and it's not worth it. Then, looking at Resi 7, you have many more options. Of course, sneaking around is the best, but you can always use firepower to get your way out of a sticky situation, assuming you have enough ammo. And yet the foes in that game still manage to feel undefeatable because of how little these human-killing guns seem to do to this twisted family, and it works incredibly well. Outlast also has a severe lack of penalty for death. The checkpoints are extremely generous, though there's no point in getting stressed out. Not to say Resident Evil is extremely better in this regard, but it is still better, as more of the stress relies on if you'll have enough resources to make it through some of the harder parts. One of about the only interesting mechanics brought to light in Outlast is its use of the camcorder and its night vision abilities. But of course it ended up being more annoying than anything. Basically everywhere in Outlast is pretty dark, so you gotta use this camcorder to see. But it has extremely limited battery life, so you have to keep an eye on that. This is Outlast's form of resource management, something all Resident Evil games are known to do very well, and it isn't great. In general, batteries are plentiful and few locations absolutely require their use, so there really wasn't much stress around wasting battery life. Plus, batteries being the only resource you have to manage makes it essentially pointless to explore if you have a good amount, but well, we'll get to that in a minute. Looking at Resident Evil, resource management is where this game shines. You're constantly looking around for all sorts of resources, but you have to carefully manage your carrying capacity by sorting out your items for maximum storage space, and you're forced to choose between holding more ammo and powerful guns, or healing and key items. It's such a perfect and compelling way of doing things. It's honestly nothing short of genius, which I suppose is why it's in like every Resident Evil game. And now to the final point, atmosphere and location. This is another part where Outlast is almost good. The locations are semi-interesting with some variety, I guess, but there could easily be a lot more. Especially more interesting colors instead of the boring gray and brown palettes found everywhere. But the problem with these locations is that once again I was never compelled to explore them. As I said, the only real reason to look around would be to find batteries, but there's plenty of them along the main path anyways. Sure, there's probably notes and lore, but when I'm already bored with the story and gameplay, I'm definitely not caring about the backstory. Resident Evil VII makes you explore its locations if you want enough resources, not to mention its open design is a whole lot better with maps, locked doors, and such. Overall, if there was an interesting atmosphere in Outlast, I didn't see it, and that's a big problem. So, in conclusion, all of this is why I believe Outlast sucks and fails as a horror game. It's rather disappointing because I do see potential in some of the concepts present here, but they just have to be tweaked in a lot of ways for them to be great. And yes, I understand that part of this may be due to a small budget and team. I've also heard the sequel is much better, but I'm not sinking any more money into this franchise. As always, this is completely my opinion. I know for a fact that there's a lot of folks out there who did enjoy Outlast, and good for you. I don't understand how, but you do you. And well, if you enjoyed, please check out some of my other videos. Or if you didn't enjoy, feel free to dislike and post a mean comment, because honestly those are usually really entertaining. Either way, thanks for watching. Bye.